Transcribing is the lifeblood of becoming a great jazz improviser. I mean, you can go and you can try to get some vocabulary out of the Riley book, which is a great book. He's a genius. But a lot of people will find that it just doesn't come out in your playing because you learned it from a book. You learned it by looking at something rather than hearing it and playing it, which is what you're doing when you're improvising. But you might have run into this problem where you start transcribing and it's like uncomfortable and confusing and you feel like you're terrible at it and you start writing a couple of notes and you don't know what you're hearing, so you just give up before you get anything out of it, or maybe you transcribe some stuff but it just never comes out in your playing. The reason for this, there's really two reasons. One is that we're doing the wrong type of transcribing, and two is that we don't have an actual process for doing transcriptions, okay? And in this video I'm going to break down both of those things. What the right type of transcribing is, depending on your goals, and then two, how to do it once you've got that figured out, okay? So the way I see it, there's basically three types of transcription, right? There's number one, which is what I call transcribing for history, okay? So this is where you get a recording that you really like, and you get out your little staff paper and you write down every single note, note for note, and you try to write it out perfectly before you ever try to play anything, okay? And the reason to take this much time to write things out perfectly is if you're doing some sort of like presentation at a conference or something where you're presenting about the history of Max Roach or something like that and you need it as a handout or something like that. Now, here's the thing. You will probably never do that. Most jazz musicians will never do that. Yet, almost everybody starts by saying, oh, I need to write this out perfectly. I need to get it dialed in. Oh, I need to have every single note right before I even try to play any of it, right? That's why it gets so frustrating and uncomfortable. It's not a skill you need at the beginning, okay? The second type of transcription is where you're saying to yourself, okay, I gotta actually play this stuff, and some of this stuff I can't play, okay? It's what I call an etude transcription, okay? So this is where you say, you know what, I wanna get better at this one skill. Let's say I'm trying to get better at my six-stroke rolls, so I check out this Greg Hutchins solo. Or I'm trying to get better at my coordination between my hands and feet, so I check out this Max Roach solo, okay? And with an etude transcription, you don't even necessarily have to write the whole thing down. You could just learn it by ear. But the goal of it is to play the whole transcription verbatim, okay? It's to be able to play that whole solo. And this is usually the next place where everybody tries to go with their transcriptions after trying to write it out perfect, is they try to learn that solo. But what you're gonna find is that that stuff doesn't necessarily come out in your playing because you're not practicing how to apply it in your solos. You're practicing how to, you know, kind of copy and paste or regurgitate the solo that you already heard. Now that's really good for refining your technique and your subtleties, and I do a couple of those a year, but they take, you know, a couple of months because I spend a lot of time just refining, trying to get every note perfect. I memorize it, and then it's a whole different process to get into my playing, okay? So this can often be too big of a hurdle to jump over when you start your transcription, which is why it feels so uncomfortable and confusing, right? Now, the third way to transcribe is the way that I personally use the most, and it's the way that I think is the best, most accessible way to change your playing on the instrument and actually apply it. And it's what I call transcribing for creativity, or transcribing for inspiration, okay? So what is transcribing for creativity? It's where you take a recording from one of your favorite drummers or saxophone players, and you listen to their solo and you wait until you hear something you like, because this is what artists do. They play things that they like. And we're playing jazz to be artists, okay? So you wait till you hear something that you like, and then you figure out that phrase. Now, usually when you're doing transcribing for creativity, it's usually a small phrase, a bar, a half a bar, right? Maybe 2 bars, just a little fragment, maybe a beat, right? It's just taking one little idea, because if you take a big long phrase, then it becomes this copy-paste thing that's kind of hard to shove into a solo. It's much better if you just take a little small phrase so that later you could change it, you can make it your own, it's much more flexible. And really, instead of, you know, spending all your time writing it down, like the history one, or spending all your time memorizing a solo so you can regurgitate it, you're spending most of your time being creative with the phrase and figuring out how to apply it, which is the whole point. You're practicing the transcriptions so that when you get on stage, your solo ideas are better, okay? So that's the type of transcribing that we're going to talk about in this video. Now, you don't want to just go for it. You need to have a process, because otherwise it is going to feel overwhelming How do you eat a whale? A single bite at a time. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Now, I do want to make a disclaimer. Transcribing is just one part of the process of becoming a complete jazz musician. You're also going to need to learn tunes. You're going to have to refine your phrasing. You got to have good coordination on your instrument. You got to have a good sound. You got to listen to the great musicians, right? There's so many things you got to do. You got to make sure you listen to people and that you can interact with them. Can't cover all of that in this video, so we're mostly going to focus on the transcription, but I do work on that with my students. So if you're interested in becoming a student, click the link in the description and reach out and book a call. We'll see if it's a good fit. I also have a free 7-day jazz drumming course in the description if you want to check that out. Okay, let's jump into the transcription. So today we're going to be transcribing a very small phrase from Kenny Washington's Trading Fours on Clark Terry's tune, Hey Mr. Mumbles, from Clark Terry live at the Village Gate. Okay, so we're going to listen to the phrase first. I'm going to kind of identify the phrase that I hear that I like, and then we'll go from there. Let's check it out. Okay, it's that last phrase. That phrase right there, okay? Now, step one of doing any transcription, you can hear that, you can hear there's a whole bunch of notes, but it's really hard. It can be really overwhelming if you're just trying to grab everything all at once. So the first thing I like to do is to transcribe myself, not the record. Because I'm awesome. No, I'm just joking. Kenny Washington's awesome. But no, I like to transcribe myself. What I mean by that is instead of like listening to it and really just trying to pluck it out of thin air, I try to sing it and then transcribe what I'm singing, okay? So if I can sing it, then that means I can hear it in my head much more clearly, and it's going to be easier to transcribe, okay? So let's listen again, and I'm going to try to sing it. Okay, cool. So you can see I'm not singing it perfectly. I'm not thinking about like all the details. It's just about the process of audiation, which is hearing something in your head. So I don't have to sing it perfect. It's just so I can hear it in my head. I'm going to listen to it again and sing it one more time. So, okay, cool. Now, I have that in my head. The next thing is I want to start to ask questions. This is what I do with my students in the jazz school. If you don't know what you're hearing, ask questions, okay? So the first question I'm going to ask myself, this is usually the easiest one, is what is the subdivision? Is it quarter notes? Is it eighth notes? Is it 16th notes? Is it triplets? Okay? So I can listen to it. This is the tempo. Quarter notes would just sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on, right? Triplets, 16th notes, right? From hearing that, I can feel that it's 16th notes, okay? Cool, so that tells me a lot, and I can also tell just from listening that it's all the 16th notes, so there's no rest, it's just kind of all filled in, but there's some different accents in there. Now that I know it's 16th notes, the next thing I'm going to ask myself is what drums, right? So you're playing the bass, the ride, you know, the hi-hats, the snare, the toms. I'm going to listen for that and see which drums I hear. Okay, so I definitely hear the snare drum. That's the first thing I hear, but I also hear these accents that are on one of the toms. I'm going to listen again, see if I can tell if it's the high tom or the floor tom. Pretty sure that that's going to be the high tom, and it's mostly on the snare with some accents on the high tom. Now that I know it's those two drums, the next thing is just to ask myself how many of each, right? Is it like every other note? Like, is there one high tom and then the rest snare? I'm going to listen to that. Okay, what I heard in that is that there's like da-doom, da-doom, right? Just like I sang earlier, da-doom, da-doom. And those are the high toms, okay? So it's like these accents somewhere in the bar, somewhere after beat 1, that are like these groups of 2 16th notes. Da-doom, da-doom. And you see how I've listened to this so many times without even writing anything down, right? And I just wrote down my first 2 things, and it's very broad, right? I can kind of fill in the gaps. This is kind of how our brains like to think of things. It's easier to piece things together, eat the whale one bite at a time, than try to hear the whole thing all at once. No, I'll tell you the other thing that I heard is that there's a snare on beat 1, okay? So this is all I know. I know that there's kind of like a snare accent and then there's these tom accents. Okay, and for now, that's all I got. Now the next thing is you can hear that, you know, we have these accents, but I don't really know where they are. I know they're 16th notes, they're doubles, but I don't know what beat they're on, okay? So I'm gonna back this up a little bit and I'm gonna try to hear what beats they start on or what beats they end on, okay? So here's how I like to think of this. I like to use something with my students called strong beats and weak beats, okay? And strong beats and weak beats, they're kind of like a hierarchy of like what note is the strongest, right? So like a good example of this is like if you listen to Back in Black or a James Brown song or something like this, there's so much emphasis on the one, right? Boom, cat, boom, boom, cat, boom, cat, to boom, boom, cat, boom, cat, to boom, boom, cat. Because 1 is the strongest beat in a bar of 4/4, okay? After that, the next strongest beat is beat 3. 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3. And what I mean by strong beat is that they're the most kind of rooted. It's not that they're the most accented, because sometimes you might accent the off beats or the weak beats, but they're the most grounded. They feel earthy. And there's a feeling in your body you get on a strong beat, right? As opposed to a weak beat, which I'm going to show you in a second, okay? So after that, the next strongest beats are 2 and 4, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. All those quarter notes are strong beats, right? And then we have the weak beats, like the ands, right? 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 4, 1 and, right? Those are weaker beats. They're the ands. They feel like they feel like jagged. They feel like jumpy or twitchy, right? Rather than really just like rooted, okay? And it's important to feel that in your body because that's what's gonna make transcription easy, is because that way you can use your intuition rather than having to like use your brain to figure all this stuff out. It's exhausting to have to use your brain to figure everything out. Music should be mostly intuitive and then you gradually add structure of understanding on top of it. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put back on the recording, I'm gonna kind of clap along the quarter notes and I'm gonna see if these accents, if any of them fall on a strong or weak beat, right? So since they're 16th notes and there's a double, one of them is going to be on like a E or an and then one of them is going to be like on a 1 or an and, right? So weak or strong, and I'm going to see where I feel that, okay? Okay. So it went by kind of fast. You can always slow this stuff down. I might even do that for the next part. But what I heard is that it felt like this note was on a strong beat, right? And I know this one's on beat 1. So I think that this is beat 2, okay? I'm going to listen again and see if I can confirm that. Boom. Totally, totally. This is a good principle of figuring out transcribing is guess and check, right? I got my best guess and then I check it, I test it. It's like kind of like the scientific method, okay? So now that I know that this is beat 2, this is beat also 2? No, it's beat 1, right? Now I can fill this in because I know the rest of it is 16th notes. So I have 1, E, and then this has to be beat 2, so that means this has to be a 2. Bless you. Okay, good. So I have that much. Now let's see if I can figure out those doubles here. Let's see if those are on strong beats or weak beats. For this one, let's go ahead and slow it down because it's a little harder to hear. I also want to answer a quick question about that. I get this question a lot. Am I supposed to slow it down? Is it bad to slow it down? You'll hear a lot of teachers really, really poo-poo that. And the intent of that is they want you to get to the point where you can hear something on a record and just know it instantly. And I think that's a great goal to aspire to. At the beginning, however, that might be overwhelming. You do need to train this skill, so be patient with yourself. When I first started transcribing, I would slow things down so I could hear it better, and then you gradually ramp it up and you get better and faster at it. So it's totally okay, but try to aim eventually for being able to hear it on the fly. Okay, so it didn't fall on one of my claps. Okay, it didn't fall on my beat 3 or my beat 4, which I was really hoping it would. That would have made it easy. So I know it's somewhere, it's a weak beat, okay? So these two are somewhere in between a 3 and a 4. If they're in between a 3 and a 4, there's only a couple possibilities. They could be E and, they could be and That's it. That's it, because neither one of them falls on a weak beat, okay? So now what I gotta think of is, does it feel like this is and, or does this feel like this is and, right? So let's listen to that. Let's see if we can feel which of those notes is and. Okay, for me, I can hear it pretty quickly that this note is and, right? So if this note is and, then this is E, okay? Great, and it's just think about the sound of those two different subdivisions, right? One of them is gonna be 2, and, 1, 2, ba-ba, 1, 2, ba-ba. The other is anda, be 1, 2, ba-ba, 1, 2, ara, 1, 2, gaya. To me, those feel completely different. It feels like different planets. And it's because of the strong weak beat thing. The first one starts on an E, it feels weaker to me. The second one starts on an and, feels a little stronger, right? You remember the hierarchy. Ands are stronger than E's, okay? That's why this stuff is so important. You gotta feel it in your body, all right? Now we gotta figure out like what, is it the E and of 3? Is it the E and of 4, right? Is it the E and of 2, right? So I gotta ask myself, does it happen right after this one, right? There's no gap, that would make it 2. Probably not, because there's some space, I heard that already. Or does it have a little bit of space in between, in which case it could be 3 E and or 4 E and. I'm just gonna kind of count 1, 2, 3 and see if it comes right after. If not, it's probably 4 E and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And if you're listening along at home, you can hear it definitely came right after 3. So that means this is 3 E and, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let me see if I can squeeze this in here. I might have to rearrange things a little bit, but I have 2 E and 3. There we go, I can fit it. Okay, so now let's get these some beams. Pardon my tablet handwriting. Okay, and then those are all the toms that I heard. And the rest of it I know is on the snare drum at 16th note, so I'm just going to fill this in. So this is 3 E and A lot of people ask me if you need to have like a music notation software to do this, like Sibelius. I would say no. Learning music notation software is like learning another instrument. There's a big learning curve. So I recommend just having a piece of paper. You know how to use a pencil and paper. You've been using it your whole life. That's going to be the fastest way to do this. I'm using my iPad so that I can put it on a video, but it works basically the same. Okay, so now I've got this. 1, 2, E and 4 E and A. Okay, now the last step we're going to do is to listen for any subtleties, okay? Now this always happens, you know, I really started big picture. I got the accents, I got the instrumentation, and then I kind of zoomed in on the subdivisions and where they were. Now I want to zoom in even more on the details and see if there's any little details I miss. So little details would be things like if something was swung for most of the bar but straight for the last bit, or maybe there's a little buzz in there somewhere. Or for drums, a lot of times it's like there's a hi-hat or a bass drum that just kind of sounds in the background, and it's not a big part of the sound, but you know, the drummer just kind of played it on accident almost sometimes, right? So I want to listen for those things. And then the other thing I want to listen for is maybe there's some different accents, okay? I heard these ones really clear because they were on different drums, but I'm going to listen if maybe there's any other accents on the snare during the bar that might be more subtle. Okay, to me, I hear the last 4 beats just very subtly accented, and I'm writing these legato marks. It's kind of common in drum notation to write a legato mark to mean sort of accented, okay? So not as much as these ones over here, but not as low as the taps in here, okay? So let's listen one more time, see if you can hear that. Okay, cool. Now I've got this phrase. I'll play it once for you, but we're not going to go through the whole process of, working out the phrase. This video is more about transcribing, but it sounds like this. Cool. Pretty simple, right? Now later on I would go and work out the rest of it, but like I said, that's not what this video is about, okay? So just to review everything that we went through, the process. First of all, transcribe for creativity. Take little ideas, okay? The process of actually transcribing is step 1, transcribe yourself, not the record, okay? So that means don't transcribe what you hear, transcribe what you can sing, because you're going to hear it way better, okay? The next step, get the subdivision, okay? Is it 16th notes, 8th notes, triplets, right? What's the main subdivision of this? Okay? That's going to give you so much big picture, like you're going to have 90% of it just from doing that, okay? The next thing is to ask yourself, what's the orchestration, okay? What drums are being played, you know? Is it the snare, bass, toms, cymbals, right? Any of that. And then ask yourself how many of each, right? Is it all snares and then there's a couple toms? That's what you saw in this example, right? Is it back and forth between the snare and the bass? Is it 2 snare, 2 bass, 2 snares, 2 bass? You'll start to hear these patterns more quickly, okay? The next thing is to figure out where specific beats are. For this example, it was like where these 16th note accents lied, right? What we call this is start and end, right? Where does the idea start? Where does it end, right? For this example, where did these doubles start? Where did they end, right? You can figure it out by guess and check. The way that you're going to use this is by using strong and weak beats, right? And then, by the time you do this, you should have most of it. The last step is just to listen for subtleties. Things like accents, things like different textures, half accents, different sounds on the drums, the bass, or the hi-hat, any of that stuff. So, I hope you find this really useful. Go transcribe something, a small phrase for creativity. Let me know in the comments which one you're going to do. And if you found this video interesting, you'll probably like the one that's recommended right here. I'll see you on the flippy flop.